Have you ever wondered what would happen if the universe's most powerful beings were not ancient empires or unstoppable war machines, but the humans we thought were long gone, lost to time and silence? What if everything we believed about them was wrong, and their slumber was not a tragedy, but the beginning of something far greater? In this story, we uncover a secret hidden among the stars, a legend that challenges everything the galaxy thought it knew. When the humans awaken, they don't bring war or ruin. They bring something far more chaotic, beautiful, and unstoppable. Stay with us as we journey through a universe forever changed by the return of the sleepiest giants, and discover why sometimes, the biggest dreams are born when we dare to close our eyes. Chapter 1, The Rule That No One Questions. Across the endless ocean of stars, among the swirling galaxies and shimmering nebulas, there was one race that stood above all others, beings of pure crystal light known as the Xelians, masters of science, wisdom, and exploration. Their floating cities, suspended within vast clouds of bioluminescent gas, sparkled like living jewels against the velvet backdrop of space. Their technology had reached levels so advanced that faster-than-light travel was considered as mundane as tying shoelaces, and the manipulation of quantum fields was as simple to them as breathing. From the outside, it would have seemed that the Xelians had conquered every frontier, solved every riddle the universe could offer, yet despite all their knowledge, despite their infinite ambition, there was one rule they would not, could not, break: do not wake the humans. This commandment was not written in laws nor enforced by fleets of warships, yet it was obeyed with more fear and reverence than any decree ever made. It was passed down across generations, whispered among scholars, taught in the earliest lessons of children, and preserved in the archives of every star-spanning civilization that came after. No one really knew the full truth behind the warning, for the humans had become a legend more than a memory, drifting through the cosmos in colossal cryoships, relics from a time when Earth itself had been reduced to ash and ruin during a brutal Third World War. Stories said that, facing extinction, humanity had chosen not to fight to the last breath, but to sleep, to entrust their fate to the mercy of the future, embarking on an odyssey through the stars in a hope that one day they might awaken to a kinder universe. Their ships were scattered across sectors of forgotten space, ancient hulks that still pulsed with life deep inside, preserved by autonomous systems too advanced for even the Xelians to fully understand. Hulls battered by centuries of radiation and meteor storms still bore a singular, chilling inscription, etched into every language known at the time: let them sleep. And so they had. For millennia, humanity remained untouched, silent, a slumbering giant hidden among the stars. Empires rose and crumbled, mighty fleets battled for dominion of planets, and alien civilizations made and remade history countless times, but none dared approach the sleeping humans beyond mere observation. The Xelians, with all their boundless curiosity, scanned from a distance, peered into the ancient records, even debated endlessly about the origins of the warning, but none ever crossed the forbidden line. Until now. Zix was young, a scientist fresh from the prestigious Galactic Academy, his crystalline form still vibrant with the eagerness of youth, his mind sharp and restless, always thirsting for new discoveries. When his research team detected the drift of an unregistered human cryoship in the forgotten corridors of Sector 7, he felt the pull of temptation stronger than any lesson or law. Floating there in the void, the ship was magnificent in its decay, vast and scarred, yet humming with faint signals, silent cries to the stars from another age. Zix stared at it through the viewport of the research vessel, and despite himself, despite the warnings of his superior, Chief Scientist ZYTH, a single thought echoed in his mind: what secrets could lie inside? The rule said to let them sleep, but surely, he reasoned, a simple scan, a harmless probe, would not constitute waking them. No one would know. No one needed to know. He hesitated for only a moment longer, then extended a slender, gleaming probe towards the ancient ship, its sensors calibrated to detect and decode without physical interaction. It was a small act, a mere whisper against the tide of cosmic silence, but in that whisper, the fate of the galaxy would be changed forever. As the probe's signal brushed the hull, there was a reaction, subtle at first, a flicker of lights running along the ship's spine, a soft tremor deep within its core. Zix felt the vibration in his own structure, a low thrumming of antsy. Chapter 2, Curiosity kills the silence. Zix floated near the viewing platform, his crystalline form humming with a mixture of exhilaration and terror, staring in stunned silence as the ancient human ship stirred from its timeless slumber. What had started as a simple, harmless scan had somehow shattered the balance that had been preserved across the galaxy for millennia. The probe had barely grazed the hull, transmitting only the most basic energy pulse, yet that was enough. Deep within the colossal vessel, ancient systems roared back to life, awakening protocols fired with ruthless efficiency. Lights blinked in sequence, engines rumbled deep within the ship's iron bones, and rows upon rows of cryogenic pods began the slow, methodical process of opening. On board the Xelian research vessel, panic spread like wildfire. Alarms shrieked through the polished halls. Holographic displays overflowed with warning messages in languages so old even the translation algorithms struggled to keep up. Chief Scientist ZYTH burst into the control chamber, his form radiating sharp, discordant vibrations of anger and disbelief, demanding to know what had been done. Zix, his glow flickering between shame and fear, stammered an explanation, but the damage was visible on every monitor around them. The human ship was awakening, and it was not a slow, uncertain process as one might expect after centuries of sleep. It was swift, deliberate, as if the systems had merely been waiting for a signal, any signal, to resume their work. The Xelians could only watch, helpless, as ancient engines purred to life with mechanical grace. As the first humans stirred within their pods, their breathing deepened, their limbs twitched, and soon, faces pressed against the frosted glass, eyes blinking into the new world that awaited them. Zix tried to reverse the scan, to halt the process somehow, but it was like trying to stop a supernova with a whisper. The momentum was unstoppable, irreversible. Centuries of slumber crumbled in moments, and the consequences would ripple across the stars. The ship's external lights, dim for eons, flared brilliantly, casting long shadows across the sleek surfaces of the research vessel. Signals began to broadcast, primitive yet powerful, messages not of distress but of intent, and though the language was archaic, the tone needed no translation. Humanity was back. ZYTH's voice cut through the rising chaos, ordering the crew to send an emergency transmission to High Command. Code Ultraviolet. Human activation detected. Containment requested. As communications officers scrambled, Zix drifted back from the console, horror growing within him. He had read the warnings, he had listened to the stories, but he had never truly believed until now. Within minutes, a fleet of Xelian warships materialized around them, forming a glittering barrier of containment, their hulls gleaming under the twin suns that lit the sector. The High Commander herself appeared on the main view screen, her crystalline body shimmering with a deep, furious purple that signaled barely contained rage. "You neutron star brain fool," she spat, using an ancient insult so old it made the junior officers wince. "Do you have any idea what you have unleashed?" Zix opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. What defense could he offer? What excuse could justify the act of waking the universe's most carefully guarded secret? On the human vessel, pods continued to open, one after another, like flowers blooming in time-lapse. Humans stumbled out, groggy but quickly gaining their footing, their movements uncoordinated but purposeful. One figure in particular caught the watcher's attention, a human taller than most, with hair sticking out in every direction and deep shadows under their eyes, holding a strange steaming cup in one hand and glaring into the void as if daring the stars themselves to challenge them. It was not a sight of terror, not yet, but of something far more unsettling, irritation. The first communication came moments later, broadcast on all channels. It was a simple message, short, cutting, delivered in a voice still heavy with sleep. "Who dares disturb our slumber?" The translation software hesitated, uncertain how to interpret the emotional subtext, but no one needed an algorithm to understand the underlying fury. ZYTH exchanged a glance with the High Commander, her glow dimming with dread. The humans were not just awake, they were angry. Desperate measures were discussed in rapid bursts of data. Could they be put back into cryo-sleep? Could they be negotiated with? But every idea collapsed under the weight of one truth. No one knew how to control an awakened human population. There were no protocols, no contingencies, only ancient warnings and vague legends of power beyond reason. The human ship, despite its battered exterior, powered up systems that should have been impossible for its age. Engines older than Xelian civilization thrummed with renewed strength. Energy signatures flared across the spectrum, dwarfing even the combined might of the containment fleet. Still, the Xelians tried to respond, tried to send messages of peace, of apology, of desperate offers to make amends, but the humans did not seem interested in formalities. As more of them awakened, the mood on board the ship shifted from groggy confusion to focused annoyance. They gathered in makeshift groups, passing cups of coffee, stretching, muttering under their breath in languages long forgotten by the stars. The nerve center of the ship pulsed with life, ancient systems coming online one by one as if they too shook off the dust of centuries with a lazy yawn. In the command chamber of the research vessel, tension thickened to a choking density. Officers shuffled nervously, their crystalline forms flickering with uncertainty, waiting for orders that could not come fast enough. Across the fleet, captains monitored the unfolding chaos, some whispering prayers to whatever forces they believed in, others preparing escape vectors in case negotiations failed catastrophically. The High Commander, her voice now steady but grim, issued the command that no Xelian had dared imagine giving in living memory. "Prepare for full diplomatic surrender if necessary," she said, her glow flickering with resignation. "We woke them. We must face whatever comes." Zix, standing small and trembling in the corner of the chamber, watched as the galaxy he knew unraveled before his eyes, the forbidden secret no longer dormant but awake, stretching, yawning, and very, very displeased. He had wanted to unlock a mystery, to claim a discovery unlike any other, and in a way, he had succeeded. But as he stared at the massive human ship now surrounded by anxious warships, he realized the full cost of his curiosity. It would not just be his career, his reputation, or even his species' pride at stake. It would be the fate of the galaxy itself, and there was no undoing what had been set in motion. The giants had awoken, and now, all anyone could do was hope to survive what came next. Chapter 3, The Coffee Uprising. The docking bay of the ancient human ship creaked open with a deep metallic groan that echoed across the surrounding void, signaling the first direct contact between the awakened humans and the Xelian containment fleet. A diplomatic team, polished to radiant perfection, floated cautiously toward the opening, their crystalline bodies reflecting nervous patterns of light. They were armed not with weapons but with apologies, scripts prepared over centuries, treaties drafted in anticipation of every possible reaction, yet nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared them for what awaited inside. The humans stood in a loose, ragged group, still shaking off the stiffness of centuries of sleep, their clothes rumpled, their hair defying gravity in ways that unsettled even the most experienced diplomats. In their hands, they clutched steaming mugs filled with a dark, volatile liquid that Xelian sensors immediately flagged as chemically unstable. The translation matrices hesitated before identifying it as something called coffee, a substance that seemed to radiate emotional energy almost as strongly as plasma radiation. At the forefront of the human group stood a tall figure, dark circles under their eyes, hair sticking out wildly, robe-like garments fluttering slightly in the recycled ship's atmosphere. The leader, if one could call them that, raised their mug and took a long, noisy sip, their glare piercing through the polished facade of the approaching delegation. "You're the ones who woke us up," the human said, voice rough and unamused. It was not a question, it was an accusation. Ambassador Crystal, leader of the Xelian delegation, stepped forward, her form shimmering with the most calming hues known across 17 species. She bowed slightly, an act of deep respect among dozens of cultures, and began her rehearsed apology. "Most esteemed humans, on behalf of the Galactic Alliance, we extend our deepest regrets for this unintended disturbance. We offer reparations, assistance," and she was cut off mid-sentence. "Save it, Sparkles," the human interrupted, another deep sip from the coffee, their expression not softening one bit. "Do you have any idea how hard it is to get several million people to agree on a nap schedule? Do you?" The rhetorical question hung heavy in the air, and for the first time, Ambassador Crystal realized they had stumbled into a situation far beyond diplomacy. The humans were not merely awake, they were irritable, and worse, they were fully conscious of the inconvenience thrust upon them. Murmurs spread through the gathered humans, their annoyance rippling outward like a shockwave, and it became clear that they were not in the mood for negotiations. They wanted answers, and they wanted coffee. Lots of it. An attempt was made to offer gifts, luxurious comfort technologies, dream enhancement systems, even ownership of entire resort planets. But the humans barely glanced at the holographic presentations. One of them, a shorter human with bright green hair, snorted loudly and said, "You think you can bribe us back to sleep with fancy pillows? Do you even know how hard it is to get back to sleep once you've been woken up?" Crystalline diplomats, trained for centuries in the arts of calming hostile situations, found themselves at a loss. Their bodies flickered anxiously, unable to process the sheer casualness of human irritation. It only worsened when the humans learned that during their slumber, certain essential parts of their culture had been lost, specifically, a tragedy so grave it sent ripples of outrage through their ranks. Pizza, the beloved food of their species, had gone extinct. The reaction was immediate and explosive: loud complaints, flailing gestures, demands for immediate rectification. One particularly animated human fell to their knees and let out a wail so mournful that Ambassador Crystal momentarily believed a star had died nearby. As the diplomatic team scrambled to maintain order, another crisis emerged. Humans started forming what they called a town hall meeting, an assembly where grievances could be aired freely. The concept sent waves of horror through the Zillion command structure. Millions of recently awakened, extremely grumpy humans gathering to complain at once was a scenario none of their training had prepared them for. Back on the research vessel, Zix watched the live transmission with a growing sense of existential dread. He had broken the rule, he had woken the humans, and now he was witnessing the full, terrifying consequences. Commander ZYTH stood beside him, silent, his form dulled with resignation. There was no easy solution, no quick apology that could undo what had been set in motion. The humans were awake, and they were not going back to sleep anytime soon. As the humans debated among themselves, their frustrations spilled over into broader issues. Discovering that their favorite entertainment platforms no longer existed only fueled the fire. Mentions of Netflix withdrawal, lost social media profiles, and extinct snack foods combined into a litany of grievances so complex the universal translators struggled to keep up. The words were simple enough, but the emotional weight behind them, a tangled mass of disappointment, irritation, and betrayal, nearly overloaded the diplomatic channels. In a final desperate move, Ambassador Crystal offered the humans unrestricted control over several luxurious planets where they could rebuild their lost comforts, maybe even recreate their vanished foods. But the human leader, still in their oversized pajamas and clutching a refill of coffee, only shook their head slowly. The rejection was clear, firm, and utterly chilling. "Bold of you to assume we'll ever feel like sleeping again." That sentence, later recorded and analyzed in hundreds of strategy meetings, would mark the true beginning of the human re-emergence onto the galactic stage, not as a pitiful remnant of a forgotten civilization, but as a force fueled by caffeine, irritation, and centuries of bottled-up ideas. As the humans began organizing committees for everything from snack recovery projects to entertainment restoration, the diplomatic teams realized the enormity of the situation. They had not awakened a lost race seeking guidance, they had unleashed a hyperactive species determined to reshape the galaxy according to their own chaotic vision. Commander ZYTH, watching the endless formation of human task forces and brainstorming groups, turned to Zix with a hollow, almost amused tone. "Congratulations," he said dryly, "you have turned the universe's most powerful sleepers into the most energetic project managers it has ever seen." Zix, unable to respond, simply slumped against the wall, his glow dimming to a faint, mortified blue. The coffee uprising had begun, and there was no force in existence capable of putting humanity back to bed now. Chapter 4, Secrets Beneath the Sleep. The galaxy had always believed the humans had gone to sleep out of desperation, that faced with dwindling resources, environmental collapse, and endless wars, they had fled into the cold embrace of cryogenic suspension, a tragic footnote in the long history of civilizations that could not survive their own brilliance. But as the days passed and the awakened humans began to reveal more about themselves, it became terrifyingly clear to the Zillions and every species watching that the truth was far more unsettling. The humans had not slept because they were dying, they had slept because they were bored. It began with small revelations, innocuous comments overheard during the chaotic meetings that sprang up across the human vessel, a casual mention that they had solved world peace centuries ago, a bored shrug when discussing faster-than-light travel, laughter when the Zillions offered them advanced energy technologies that humans apparently considered outdated toys. At first, the diplomatic corps assumed it was bluster, bravado from a race trying to reclaim lost pride, but when human engineers began casually repairing their ancient ship using tools that bent quantum fields with a flick of the wrist. When they recreated lost data archives from memory alone, it became undeniable. Humanity had not declined into sleep. They had ascended beyond the need for constant action. They had mastered every major challenge their species had faced and found themselves with nothing left to do. Commander Zyth reviewed the growing mountain of reports with a sinking heart, cross-referencing the timelines humans spoke of so casually. It became evident that their advances had predated many of the great discoveries the Xelians prided themselves on: clean energy, global unity, universal healthcare, solutions to aging and disease, all achieved long before the first Xelian starship had even touched the void. The true tragedy, if it could be called that, was that humanity had reached the peak of existence and found it dull. Rather than fall into nihilism or stagnation, they had chosen an extraordinary alternative. They had created the cryogenic ships, not as lifeboats but as retreats, sanctuaries where they could rest, dream, and perhaps allow the universe around them to catch up. The greatest prank in galactic history had been seeded across the stars, warnings etched into every known language, technological decoys planted to look primitive and unthreatening, a web of misinformation so complete that even the brightest minds had accepted it without question. They had done it for the same reason a brilliant child might pretend to be asleep to avoid tedious chores, because engaging with the galactic civilizations in their infancy would have been exhausting. Humanity had decided to step aside, to nap through the growing pains of the younger races, and perhaps wake up when things were more interesting. Evidence of this strategy lay everywhere now that the veil was lifted. What had seemed like clumsy, aged technology was, upon closer inspection, breathtakingly sophisticated. Quantum consciousness storage devices masked as simple cryopods, reactors that manipulated dark matter with casual ease disguised as worn-down engines. Even their ancient databases contained encryption so advanced that Xelian code breakers could barely comprehend it. The revelation rocked the Galactic Alliance to its core. Decades of carefully constructed historical narratives unraveled overnight. Species that had seen themselves as the pinnacle of advancement now realized they had been developing under the silent, watchful eyes of cosmic giants who had chosen sleep over dominion. Pride turned to confusion, confusion to awe, and awe, inevitably, to fear. For if humanity had been capable of such deception, what else had they planned? What other secrets lay buried beneath their sleepy exteriors? Yet among the humans, there was no sinister agenda, no master plan, only bemusement at the unfolding drama. To them, the awakening was merely an inconvenience, a disruption of a very long, very well-earned rest. During a particularly chaotic assembly broadcast across the containment fleet, a human scientist with wild, unkempt hair stood up, holding a battered data slate, and began listing projects they had completed while sleeping: universe-scale simulations, solutions to theoretical physics problems, social experiments spanning multiverses, reality television scenarios modeled down to atomic levels, and even, with a mischievous grin, the definitive answer to why socks always disappeared in laundry cycles, though they refused to reveal that secret, claiming some mysteries were better left unsolved. As laughter and disbelief rippled through the galactic delegates, it became clear that humanity's sleep had not been idleness but the most productive hibernation imaginable. They had played, dreamed, calculated, and refined themselves into something beyond any known model of evolution. Commander Zyth, attending the session via hologram, listened in silence, grappling with the enormity of what he was hearing. Beside him, Zix, whose accidental probe had triggered this cosmic revelation, fidgeted nervously, casting occasional guilty glances at the data streams scrolling past. It was Zyth who finally broke the silence, murmuring in a low, awed tone, "We thought we were shepherding a lost flock, but we were merely guests in a world they had already conquered." No one disagreed. The humans, however, showed little interest in reclaiming thrones or leading the galaxy. Instead, they spoke animatedly about reorganizing snack delivery systems, rebuilding streaming entertainment platforms, and establishing what they called universal nap zones. Leisure seemed to be their true passion, relaxation elevated to an art form few could comprehend, and yet, their casual suggestions contained ideas so profound, so efficient, that they could revolutionize entire sectors overnight. One particularly sharp moment came when a human casually sketched out a design for a multidimensional communication array that could transmit thoughts and emotions across star systems without delay, a device so advanced that even the Xelians stared in stunned silence. The humans simply shrugged and said, "We came up with it while brainstorming pizza toppings during one of the simulations," as if solving one of the galaxy's greatest technological hurdles was a side project. In the following weeks, as cultural exchanges intensified, the other races began to glimpse the true depth of what had been hidden beneath human sleep. They saw not conquerors or saviors, but brilliant, restless beings who had simply decided to nap while the universe caught up, beings whose natural state was creativity, chaos, and curiosity intertwined. And now they were awake. The implications stretched far beyond diplomacy or politics. For better or worse, the universe was entering a new era, one shaped not by fear or ambition, but by the peculiar, unstoppable energy of a species that had already solved existence and now sought simply to make it more interesting, as ZYTH said in the command chamber late one cycle, reviewing the endless proposals for interstellar coffee delivery, synchronized nap schedules, and something ominously labeled karaoke diplomacy. He realized with a strange mixture of dread and wonder that the galaxy was no longer what it had been. Humanity had returned, not as lost relics of a broken past, but as architects of a future no one could have imagined. Chapter 5, The Galactic Makeover. It began innocently enough, at least, that was how the Zelians tried to explain it later. A few humans, still adjusting to being awake after centuries of sleep, began commenting on the design of nearby star systems. Their remarks were casual, offhand observations about how the layout of planets was inefficient, how certain trade routes were unnecessarily complicated because of poor gravitational planning. At first, the diplomatic observers laughed, assuming it was another quirk of human humor. But when one human, lounging in what could only be described as sleepwear, pulled up a holographic map of the local sector and, with a few flicks of their fingers, redesigned it for better traffic flow, people started paying attention. Within days, proposals poured out of the human vessel, suggestions for rearranging solar systems, optimizing planetary orbits for energy efficiency, and even adjusting asteroid belt positions to create natural shipping lanes. The proposals were brilliant, terrifyingly so, combining aesthetics with functionality in ways that the galaxy's finest minds had never considered. The humans talked about gravitational resonance like an artist discussing brush strokes, about planetary migration like a child rearranging toys, and they did it all with the effortless nonchalance of beings who had spent centuries simulating every possible version of reality. The first actual system move was a minor one, a forgotten cluster of barren rocks on the edge of Alliance space. Humans, working alongside curious engineers from several species, deployed quantum thrusters and gravitational tethers with a grace that left even the most seasoned astrophysicists speechless. The result was immediate. The planets fell into new, harmonious orbits, energy output increased, travel time decreased, and the overall system beauty rose dramatically. It was, by all measures, a masterpiece, and it was only the beginning. Emboldened by success, humans began suggesting improvements everywhere, moving minor moons to improve tidal stability, repositioning stars to reduce harmful radiation exposure on inhabited planets, even creating new rings around gas giants purely because, as one human cheerfully explained, they look cooler that way. The galaxy, which had spent thousands of years adjusting to the slow dance of celestial mechanics, suddenly found itself swept into a cosmic renovation project led by beings who saw stars and planets as pieces of a grand, unfinished puzzle. At first, there was resistance. Proud worlds balked at the idea of humans casually suggesting alterations to their ancestral skies. Entire species protested that their sacred constellations would be ruined, that ancient mythologies would be destroyed. But humans, masters of adaptation and compromise, proposed solutions faster than objections could be raised. They offered to recreate beloved constellations in new, even more breathtaking forms, to preserve mythologies by incorporating them into the new cosmic designs. The results were so stunning that resistance crumbled almost overnight. Within months, the transformation spread across sectors like a wildfire of innovation. Major trade routes shortened by years, colonies on marginal worlds suddenly found themselves basking in newly optimized orbits. Entire civilizations that had once struggled under harsh climates now flourished under balanced suns. Tourism boomed as travelers flocked to witness the artistry of human-engineered star clusters and nebula gardens. It was as if the entire galaxy had been dipped into fresh paint and allowed to dry under the warm breath of creative madness. Amid this whirlwind of change, the Zelians struggled to maintain a semblance of order. Traditional hierarchies buckled under the sheer force of human enthusiasm. Planning committees dissolved into brainstorming sessions dominated by caffeine-fueled humans sketching out impossible ideas that somehow always worked. Ancient bureaucracies collapsed when faced with proposals written on napkins that solved problems deemed unsolvable for centuries. And perhaps most alarmingly, the humans showed no signs of slowing down. Commander ZYTH, observing the unfolding chaos from the once orderly halls of the High Command, watched with a mixture of horror and awe as humans suggested moving an entire solar system slightly to the left because the view of a nearby nebula was a little off-center, when the High Commander protested, citing gravitational instability and massive resource expenditure. The human leader, still wearing a bathrobe and bunny slippers, grinned and said, "Watch us," and within a week, it was done. Flawlessly, effortlessly, almost mockingly. Meanwhile, cultural shifts rippled through the galaxy. Humans introduced casual Fridays to the traditionally rigid Zelian administrative bodies, a concept that caused widespread existential crises as crystalline beings struggled to understand the concept of dressing down when they had no clothes to begin with. Nevertheless, the movement caught on, leading to increasingly absurd interpretations involving holographic hats and projected Hawaiian shirts. Productivity paradoxically soared as workers embraced a newfound relaxation culture, proving once again that human ideas, no matter how chaotic they seemed, had a strange tendency to work out for the better. New culinary fusions emerged as humans mingled with other species, their penchant for combining flavors resulting in dishes that defied both physics and tradition. The famous void crawler vindaloo, a dish so spicy it reportedly caused minor quantum disturbances, became a symbol of the new galactic culture. Entertainment too was transformed. Humans introduced karaoke diplomacy, resolving minor disputes through interstellar singing competitions. It was during one such event, when a Zelian ambassador attempted to rap in 4 dimensions, that even the most skeptical species finally admitted humanity's influence might be unstoppable. Zix, the young scientist who had accidentally awakened this whirlwind, found himself promoted, ironically, to Director of Human Relations, a position that involved less diplomacy and more running interference between enthusiastic humans and nervous galactic officials. He spent his days mediating bizarre requests, like reallocating black holes for better backdrop aesthetics or installing planet-sized trampolines on uninhabited worlds. At first, he resisted, tried to cling to old protocols, but over time, he, like so many others, began to see the beauty in the madness. The galaxy was changing, not through war or conquest, but through laughter, creativity, and an irrepressible zest for life that no amount of planning or control could ever contain. Humans had not returned to claim dominion over the stars, they had returned to make them their playground, and somehow, in doing so, had made the universe a better, stranger, and far more beautiful place. As Commander ZYTH stood at the balcony of the newly redesigned Alliance headquarters, sipping a suspiciously delicious beverage concocted by a human mixologist, he gazed out at the shifting constellations and realized that the galaxy's makeover was not just cosmetic, it was a rebirth, one led not by fear, not by power, but by the unrelenting, unstoppable joy of humanity simply being human again. Chapter 6, Commander Threx's Very Bad Coffee Day. Commander Threx was a legend among the Zelians, a veteran of 100 diplomatic missions, a negotiator so skilled that he once convinced 2 warring black hole cults to merge peacefully by suggesting they could worship a binary system instead. He had faced down rogue artificial intelligences, quelled rebellions on dying worlds, and even survived an assassination attempt by a sentient nebula. In short, there was no situation, no negotiation, no crisis that Threx could not handle, or so everyone believed. That belief shattered spectacularly the day he was ordered to make first official contact with the awakened humans. Threx had prepared meticulously, studying every scrap of ancient human culture he could find, practicing the archaic Earth languages, refining his crystalline form to shimmer in the most comforting patterns possible. He selected a team of the best linguists, sociologists, and historians, armed himself with gifts deemed universally appealing, and set out for the human vessel with the confident stride of a being who had seen it all and expected to see it again. The docking procedure was smooth, the airlock hissed open with only a minor creak, and Threx floated forward, his team flanking him in perfect formation. They entered a dimly lit chamber, filled with humans slouched across improvised couches and chairs, clutching steaming mugs in their hands. The smell hit Threx first, a rich, pungent aroma that his sensors immediately flagged as a volatile chemical mixture, yet the humans seemed utterly dependent on it, sipping it with reverence, eyes half-lidded, bodies still wrapped in various forms of sleepwear. Threx cleared his throat, a sound like a soft chime, and launched into his carefully prepared greeting. Esteemed humans, on behalf of the Galactic Alliance, we welcome your return and extend our deepest apologies for any disturbance caused to your sacred slumber. He delivered the speech flawlessly, each syllable polished to perfection. He even included a respectful bow, tilting his upper facets just so to reflect the humans' preference for humility. The human leader, a tall figure with messy hair and a robe that dragged slightly behind them, sipped deeply from their mug and stared at Threx for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then, in a voice dripping with exhaustion and irritation, said, "Did you bring coffee?" Threx, momentarily thrown off script, blinked rapidly, a rare sign of confusion among Xelians. He consulted his memory banks in a flash and found no mention of coffee being a required diplomatic gift. Thinking quickly, he gestured to his attendants, who produced an assortment of high-quality stimulants, energy crystals, and nutrient compounds, offerings that had placated entire species before. The human glanced at the offerings, snorted, and muttered something about sparkle snacks before turning back to their mug. Realizing he was losing control of the situation, Threx decided to pivot, shifting to the section of his briefing that covered shared interests and mutual benefits. He spoke of alliances, of trade routes, of cultural exchanges, but the humans, instead of responding with awe or gratitude, simply grunted, murmured among themselves, and occasionally sipped their coffee with increasingly dramatic expressions of bliss. The more Threx spoke, the more it became clear that none of them were listening. They were too busy arguing about which brewing method was superior, French press or cold brew, pour over, or espresso machine. Desperate to salvage the meeting, Threx offered to supply the humans with whatever resources they needed, assuming that perhaps the lack of supplies was causing their sour moods. The human leader perked up slightly at this, leaned forward, and with the gravitas of a diplomat proposing a major treaty, said, "We want coffee, and pizza, real pizza, not the sad imitation stuff." Threx, struggling to maintain his composure, promised to investigate these requests, though he privately wondered how important such trivial things could truly be. His answer was made clear moments later when a human, evidently pushed to the edge of patience, stood up and declared that until proper coffee and pizza were delivered, there would be no formal negotiations. Instead, they would be conducting what they called coffee taste trials, a phrase that did not appear in any of Threx's vast diplomatic training manuals. Thus began the worst day of Commander Threx's illustrious career. Samples of various galactic beverages were produced and offered, teas from the floral swamps of Iridia, nutrient tonics from the silicon fields of Zarnus, energy slurries from the black suns of the Dead Zone. Each was received with increasingly exaggerated gags and expressions of disgust by the humans, who compared each unfavorably to what they called proper coffee. Threx, feeling his dignity slip further with each passing moment, attempted to explain the chemical complexities of producing Earth-grade coffee on short notice, but the humans were unmoved. One of them solemnly declared that without coffee, their cognitive functions would remain at potato mode, a term no translator could satisfactorily decode. In a final act of desperation, Threx requested samples of actual coffee from the human stores, hoping to synthesize an acceptable replica. The humans, with the air of benevolent monarchs indulging a foolish subject, provided a battered tin of grounds older than some civilizations. Threx's team analyzed it feverishly, attempting to recreate its exact properties, but every attempt fell short, producing liquids that the humans tasted, grimaced at, and dismissed with brutal honesty. "Tastes like sadness," said one. "This is betrayal in a cup," said another. Each failed attempt chipped away at Threx's once unshakable confidence, until finally, late into the cycle, after dozens of humiliating rejections, the humans deemed one brew acceptable with a reluctant nod. Victory, if it could be called that, was short-lived, for as soon as the humans were properly caffeinated, their energy levels skyrocketed. They began planning, plotting, designing, arguing with a fervor that left the Xelians breathless. Within hours, They had formed committees, drafted proposals, demanded meetings, and begun reshaping diplomatic priorities with terrifying efficiency. Commander Threx, who had entered the day as the galaxy's premier negotiator, ended it slumped against a wall, watching in exhausted horror as humanity's irrepressible momentum bulldozed centuries of protocol. As he floated back to his ship, nursing what he could only describe as the crystalline equivalent of a migraine, Threx realized that he had survived wars, plagues, and revolutions, but nothing had prepared him for the unstoppable force that was a slightly grumpy, fully caffeinated human population. His final report to High Command was short, blunt, and utterly honest. We require immediate coffee supplies, full-scale pizza replication, and possibly spiritual counseling. Recommend reclassification of humans from dormant species to high-energy cultural event. Further contact should be approached with extreme caution and caffeine. Chapter 7. Crisis. Humans are getting sleepy again. For a time, the galaxy thrived under human energy. Projects once stalled for centuries were completed in mere months. Diplomatic stalemates dissolved under human-led karaoke competitions. Technological advances spread like wildfire. It seemed that the Great Awakening had ushered in a golden age of progress and laughter. But nothing, not even human enthusiasm, could defy nature forever. The first signs were subtle, barely noticeable to the frantic bureaucracies trying to keep up with human initiatives. It began with yawns, harmless at first, then clusters of humans lingering too long in hammocks they had installed in governmental offices, murmuring about how nice it would be to just, maybe, take a little nap. At first, the Zelians ignored the signs, attributing them to overexertion. After all, who wouldn't be tired after reorganizing entire sectors and rebuilding star systems? But soon, the evidence became impossible to deny. Meetings once bursting with human ideas now dragged as participants fought to stay awake. Coffee consumption, despite reaching alarming levels, failed to stem the tide of creeping drowsiness. Ambassadors and diplomats from every species watched in growing horror as humanity, the spark that had reignited the galaxy's imagination, began visibly losing momentum. Commander Zyth called an emergency session of the High Council. Zix was summoned along with representatives from dozens of affected worlds, all equally desperate to prevent the unthinkable. The room buzzed with a tension so thick it warped the ambient light. After hours of heated debate, it was agreed that a delegation would approach the humans directly to discuss the growing problem. Delicate language was advised, caution emphasized, as no one wished to offend the beings who had single-handedly reshaped the stars. The delegation, a colorful mixture of races now accustomed to human eccentricities, approached the human flagship with offerings of coffee, entertainment devices, and entire libraries of cat videos sourced from ancient Earth archives. In hopes of reviving their dwindling enthusiasm, the human leader, clad in a once vibrant bathrobe now looking rumpled and sad, accepted the gifts with a sleepy smile, sipped the coffee mechanically, and listened patiently as the delegates laid out their concerns. When they finished, there was a long silence. Then the human leader leaned back in their oversized chair, stretched with a dramatic yawn that seemed to echo across the hall, and said, "Yeah, about that. We're getting kinda tired again." The phrase, delivered so casually, hit the gathered diplomats like a supernova. Panic rippled through the delegation, voices rising in disbelief and desperation. Plans were hastily suggested: entertainment hubs, adrenaline therapy, caffeine infusions, even anti-sleep nanotech proposals. But the human leader only shook their head slowly, sipping their coffee with the weary resignation of a being who had seen it all and found it exhausting. "You have to understand," they said, voice thick with impending slumber. "We woke up, fixed some stuff, made things a little better, but honestly, it's still pretty boring out here, and honestly, we're tired, not just physically, existentially." Another human nearby muttered something about existential fatigue being the worst jet lag ever, drawing murmurs of agreement from the others. The delegation, scrambling for solutions, offered to create new challenges, new projects, even new galaxies if needed, but the humans smiled sadly, politely declining, explaining that rest was not a punishment but a necessity, a time to dream bigger dreams, to imagine new possibilities. Commander Zyth, heart-sinking, understood then that this was not a whim, it was inevitable. Humans burned bright and fierce, but no flame could last forever without retreating into coals for a time. Reluctantly, plans shifted from prevention to accommodation. Preparations were made for another mass hibernation, this time with humanity's full cooperation and with far better understanding. Fleets were mobilized to assist in retrofitting cryoships, advanced support systems designed to monitor and maintain the slumbering humans without interfering. In a final act of generosity, the humans prepared a series of detailed guides, covering everything from maintaining galactic harmony to creating proper recreational infrastructures. They laughed as they drafted protocols for universal holidays, mandated snack breaks, and recreational combat sports leagues designed to resolve interspecies tensions. One section simply read, "If all else fails, more coffee, more memes." On the last day before the new sleep, a grand gathering was held. Beings from every corner of the galaxy attended, offering their thanks, pledging to honor the human legacy of creativity, kindness, and chaotic joy. The humans, in their worn robes and slippers, smiled sleepily, exchanging hugs and fist bumps with beings once too terrified to approach them. There were speeches, awkward dances, and even a musical performance featuring a void crawler on drums, an event so bizarre it somehow made perfect sense. As the final preparations concluded, the human leader stood before the assembly, raised a battered coffee mug in a farewell toast, and said, "You're gonna do fine. Just remember, dream big, laugh often, and never, ever take yourselves too seriously." With that, they yawned massively, stretched their arms skyward, and shuffled back to their pod. Within hours, the cryogenic chambers sealed, life signs stabilized, and the ships began their slow, silent drift once more. The galaxy, left blinking in a sudden quiet, faced a future with mixed emotions. Loss weighed heavily, but so too did hope. Humanity had shown them a different way to exist, to find joy in the absurd, to create not just for survival but for fun, for beauty, for the sheer wonder of it all. Commander ZYTH, standing at the observation deck as the human fleet faded into the starry distance, felt a strange peace settle over him. The humans would return one day, as they always did, but until then, it was their turn to dream, their turn to shape a universe worthy of waking up to. And as he turned away from the window, a faint, amused thought crossed his mind. Maybe, just maybe, they would have fresh coffee ready when the humans came back. Chapter 8, The Legacy Left Behind. After the humans returned to their slumber, the galaxy found itself adrift in a strange new reality. The sudden silence after their departure was deafening, like the stillness left in a room once filled with laughter and chaos. At first, there was confusion, a sense of loss that echoed across worlds. Beings who had grown used to the unpredictable energy of humanity struggled to adjust to the quiet rhythms of their old lives. Yet it did not take long for the true extent of humanity's legacy to reveal itself. Everywhere one looked, signs of their influence shimmered like stardust woven into the fabric of reality. In government halls, what had once been rigid, ceremonial assemblies now buzzed with energy and creativity. Galactic councils adopted the human tradition of brainstorming sessions, where no idea was too ridiculous to be considered. Policies once buried under decades of debate now moved with unprecedented speed, and laughter, once a rare and suspicious sound in diplomatic chambers, became a daily occurrence. The humans had left behind more than just reforms, they had left a new way of thinking. A culture that valued innovation, humor, and the courage to experiment even in the face of failure. In the economic sectors, human-inspired entrepreneurial fever swept across star systems. Interplanetary pizza chains flourished, universal coffee brands competed for dominance, entire industries sprang up dedicated to leisure, recreation, and what humans fondly call vibe enhancement. Productivity soared not because of tighter controls or harsher quotas, but because beings found joy in their work, inspired by the human example of mixing business with passion and playfulness. Education underwent its own revolution. Old models of rote learning gave way to dynamic, curiosity-driven programs. Teachers encouraged exploration, creativity, and even rebellion against outdated ideas. Subjects like cosmic karaoke diplomacy, advanced nap techniques, and interstellar meme history entered curriculums alongside physics and mathematics. Young beings across hundreds of worlds grew up hearing stories of humanity's exploits, not as grim cautionary tales but as celebrations of what life could be when limits were seen not as barriers but as invitations to dream. Culturally, the galaxy became a kaleidoscope of fusion and innovation. Humans had shown that art and music, cuisine, and storytelling could transcend species and dimensions. Festivals erupted across worlds, combining traditions from 1,000 cultures. Music from every known race blended into cosmic symphonies that vibrated through the very bones of planets. Collaborative art projects painted moons with murals visible from orbit, and theaters staged performances that wove together myths and legends from every corner of the stars, all inspired by humanity's endless appetite for expression. Perhaps most surprising was the rise of what became known as the chill movement, founded on the simple human principles of taking breaks, valuing leisure, and refusing to grind endlessly without purpose. Entire governments passed laws mandating universal nap times. Relaxation centers sprang up where beings of all species could meditate, sleep, or simply lounge in zero-gravity hammocks while sipping exotic drinks. Stress levels plummeted across the galaxy, and with it, conflict diminished. 4. It turned out that a well-rested population was much harder to provoke into war. Yet not everything left behind was immediately understood. Hidden deep within the libraries of the Great Alliance Archive Station, researchers discovered a series of documents left by the humans, guides written in a language that blended humor and profound wisdom. They covered everything from advanced technologies and theoretical physics to recipes for dishes no one had ever heard of but which, upon recreation, proved delicious beyond comprehension. Among these documents were puzzles, riddles, and games, challenges designed not to frustrate but to teach, to inspire, to push boundaries. Humanity had not given the galaxy answers, they had given it the tools and the encouragement to find its own. Commander Zyth, now elevated to the position of High Counselor for Intercultural Affairs, spent many long cycles reflecting on the transformations unfolding before his crystalline eyes. He often returned to the observation deck of the Alliance headquarters, sipping human-style coffee and watching the stars rearrange themselves slowly into the elegant, playful patterns humanity had suggested. He marveled at how their influence had permeated every aspect of life, not through conquest or domination, but through the sheer, uncontainable force of their spirit. Even the void crawlers, once the most feared entities in the galaxy, had found new purpose under human influence. Their ability to induce existential dread had been redirected toward therapeutic applications, becoming some of the most sought-after counselors and meditation instructors available. They now hosted workshops titled Facing the Void Within, which were wildly popular among stressed bureaucrats and recovering warlords alike. New alliances formed, built not on fear or necessity but on shared laughter and mutual dreams. Species that had barely tolerated each other before now collaborated on projects ranging from interstellar amusement parks to cooperative art colonies drifting through the less traveled corners of space. Trade routes flourished, science advanced, and somewhere, in the silent, drifting fleet of cryoships, humans dreamed on, unaware, or perhaps very aware, that their great nap had once again reshaped the galaxy in ways no war, no treaty, no empire ever could. And though humanity slept, their presence lingered, not just in the physical changes to star systems or the new institutions bearing their names, but in the attitudes, the hopes, the very way beings now looked at the universe, with a little more wonder, a little more daring, and a whole lot more willingness to laugh at the absurdity of it all. Commander Zyth often wondered when the humans would awaken again, when they would open their eyes and see the galaxy they had helped remake. He imagined their smiles, their teasing comments, their endless ideas bubbling forth like a cosmic spring. Until then, he and the others would carry forward what they had taught, not through rigid adherence, but through living, creating, laughing, and most importantly, dreaming bigger than they ever had before. Because if there was one true legacy humanity had left behind, it was this simple, profound truth: the universe was not just a place to survive, it was a playground, an artwork, a song waiting to be sung, and it was up to every being, no matter how small or strange, to pick up a brush, a note, a dream, and make it more beautiful than it had been before. Chapter 9: The New Normal. The galaxy settled into its new rhythm slowly at first, like an orchestra learning to play a strange, beautiful new song. The old ways, once seen as immutable pillars of civilization, crumbled under the weight of laughter, creativity, and a stubborn refusal to take anything too seriously. The new normal, as it came to be called, was not dictated by laws or enforced by fleets. It grew organically, seeded in 1,000 different places by the lingering spirit of humanity and nurtured by species eager to hold on to the spark they had been given. Across worlds once ruled by rigid schedules and endless bureaucracy, Beings now measure their days not by the efficiency of their output but by the richness of their experiences. Weekends, a human invention once seen as a quaint indulgence, became sacred institutions, extended even across species who previously had no concept of rest. Whole systems synchronized their downtime, creating interstellar festivals where ships drifted together in lazy clusters, exchanging stories, games, and food. The stars themselves seemed to pulse in time with the slow, joyful heartbeat of this new way of living. Governance adapted in ways no historian could have predicted. Formal councils still existed, but they often convened in casual settings, lounges adorned with soft seating, endless snack buffets, and gentle music humming in the background. Major decisions were made over friendly debates held during game nights, where losing a round of galactic trivia could mean conceding a planetary border adjustment, and somehow, against all odds, it worked better than any previous model. Conflicts dropped to historic lows. Diplomacy became a matter of shared meals and competitive karaoke rather than stony-faced negotiations and thinly veiled threats. Even in the realm of science and technology, the changes were profound. Research stations once cold and clinical transformed into vibrant hubs of chaotic collaboration. Ideas flowed like rivers, barriers between disciplines crumbled, and breakthroughs emerged not from desperate competition but from curiosity and play. Under humanity's invisible guidance, species stopped racing to outdo one another and began racing to inspire each other instead. They found joy not just in discovery, but in the sheer act of wondering together. Entire new industries blossomed, powered by dreams instead of necessity. Leisure architecture reshaped planets, turning barren worlds into parks, gardens, and labyrinthine structures designed solely for exploration and joy. Entertainment hubs drifted in orbit around suns, offering endless games, shows, and experiences drawn from every known culture. Even the void crawlers, infamous for their terrifying reputation, opened a chain of popular meditation resorts where clients could experience controlled existential dread followed by guided sessions of cosmic gratitude. Commander ZYTH, now recognized not just as a leader but as a cultural icon of the new normal, spent much of his time traveling from world to world, ensuring that the lessons learned from humanity's brief return were not forgotten. He marveled at the creativity on display, cities shaped like fractal flowers blooming across moons, transport systems designed to resemble flowing rivers rather than rigid tracks, marketplaces that felt like festivals where the goal was less about buying and more about connecting. Everywhere he went, he found laughter, innovation, and a profound sense of ease that had once been unimaginable. In the great library world of Quendos Prime, ZYTH stood before a new memorial recently completed by artists from a dozen species. It was not a statue, nor a grand tower, but a living garden, each plant genetically tuned to pulse gently with bioluminescent colors when someone nearby laughed. At the center stood a simple structure shaped like an ancient earth coffee cup, its surface engraved with the words that had come to define an era: dream big, laugh often, nap when needed. Nearby, visitors lounged in hammocks strung between hovering platforms, sipping beverages, and sharing stories under skies painted with shifting constellations. It was a place of peace, reflection, and hope, and ZYTH found himself visiting often, drawn to the quiet affirmation that the galaxy had, in fact, learned to live better. Despite the overwhelming positivity, adjustments were not without their challenges. Some older institutions resisted change, clinging stubbornly to formality and hierarchy, but they were outnumbered by the younger generations who had grown up in a galaxy where creativity was a currency and kindness a strength. Disputes still arose, but they were resolved not with war but with dance-offs, cooking contests, and once, memorably, a competitive mural painting event that ended with a contested moon being declared a shared art sanctuary. Not a single bullet was fired, not a single life lost, just colors, laughter, and a new kind of pride. Cultural integration reached unprecedented levels. Hybrid art forms emerged, combining music, cuisine, philosophy, and sport in ways never imagined before. Fashion became an interstellar experiment, with beings of all shapes and forms adopting and adapting human casual styles, cloaks of shifting memes, hats that projected mood lighting, and, of course, the beloved bathrobe and slipper combination worn with pride across sectors. Language itself evolved. New words and phrases born from human idioms entered common use. One could walk into any marketplace and hear someone say, "Don't sweat the black holes," or "just another Tuesday in Andromeda." Education systems taught more than just facts. They taught curiosity, compassion, and the value of rest. School days included mandatory play periods, napping electives, and classes dedicated to the fine arts of daydreaming and speculative invention. The brightest students were not those who memorized the most but those who dared to imagine what had never been imagined before. Meanwhile, the human ships continued their silent drift through the stars, their slumber uninterrupted, their legacy expanding and evolving beyond anything even they could have planned. It became common for passing vessels to send messages of thanks, jokes, or updates on galactic progress toward the sleeping giants, knowing they might not hear, but sending them anyway, as a tribute, as a reminder, as a promise. Zyth often found himself wondering what it would be like when they woke again, what new wonders they would create, what new dreams they would inspire, but he also knew, deep in the core of his being, that even if they never returned, humanity had already achieved something greater than conquest or immortality. They had taught the universe to live, really live, with all the mess, beauty, absurdity, and joy that life could offer. The new normal was not perfect, nothing alive ever was, but it was vibrant, it was genuine, and it was profoundly, gloriously alive, and perhaps, Zyth thought with a smile as he sipped his slightly too strong coffee, that was the greatest gift humanity had ever given. Chapter 10, Dream Bigger. 1 year after the Great Sleep resumed, the galaxy gathered for the first universal celebration of dreams, a festival not of conquest or technology, but of imagination. Beings from every corner of the stars floated toward Quendas Prime, the unofficial heart of the new normal, to honor the ones who had taught them to live beyond survival, above fear, and into wonder. The entire planet bloomed with color, floating gardens drifted in the sky, musical symphonies stitched together from hundreds of cultures danced through the air, and laughter bubbled like a living river through the crowds. Commander Zyth stood at the central plaza, watching it all with a deep, almost reverent satisfaction. Nearby, the memorial garden pulsed gently, the bioluminescent lights flickering softly as visitors shared jokes, stories, and quiet dreams. The main ceremony was simple by design, a gathering not to boast, but to remember. Ambassadors, artists, explorers, and children spoke, not in grand declarations, but in short, heartfelt messages. One young Zari, barely past their first century, shared how they had started building dream machines inspired by a human imagination. Another, a void crawler elder, spoke of finding peace for the first time after attending a human-inspired meditation session, and everywhere, in every speech, was the same message: we are more because they showed us how to be. As the final speaker finished, a gentle hum filled the air, and a projection sprang up across the sky, crafted from the last messages left by the humans before their second slumber. It was not a set of instructions or warnings, but a simple, joyful montage of dreams, clips from simulations they had run while sleeping, art pieces born in dream space, songs composed between the stars, jokes scrawled hastily into universal code. It was chaotic, beautiful, nonsensical, and profoundly moving. Beings who had never met a human face to face found themselves laughing, crying, and dreaming anew under the kaleidoscope sky. Commander Zyth remained standing long after the crowds began drifting away, his crystalline form glowing softly as he replayed the human messages in his mind. They had left so much behind, but not with the intent to rule or to guide with a heavy hand. They had left seeds, countless seeds, each one a possibility, a challenge to every being who witnessed them to imagine more, to dare bigger, to live brighter. That night, as the twin moons of Quendas Prime rose over the festival grounds, the leaders of the Galactic Alliance gathered for what was now affectionately called the Coffee Summit. There was no formal agenda, no strict protocols, only an endless supply of coffee, pastries, and warm, comfortable seating. Discussions flowed naturally, ranging from how best to manage the increasing number of leisure colonies to whether it was possible to compose a symphony large enough to be heard across an entire solar system, and underpinning every idea was a quiet, unspoken question: what would humanity have dreamed next? It was agreed that the galaxy would not merely maintain what had been built, but expand upon it, daring to dream bigger in ways that even the humans might one day admire. Massive projects were proposed, galaxy-spanning art exhibitions, collaborative terraforming projects to create entire worlds designed for creativity, universal education initiatives dedicated not just to knowledge, but to the cultivation of wonder and compassion. and most ambitiously, a project to send message balloons drifting through deep space, containing songs, jokes, and dreams, in case somewhere, somehow, another sleeping species was waiting to be awakened. As the summit wound down, and participants lounged beneath the stars sharing stories and laughter, Commander Zyth sat quietly, watching a group of young beings from half a dozen different species playing an impromptu game of zero-gravity tag, their giggles and cheers rising into the night. It struck him then, with a clarity sharper than any analysis or report, that the humans had succeeded in ways no empire ever could. They had built a future that did not need them to stand over it, a living, breathing future that would continue to evolve, to laugh, and to dream without their direct hand. The galaxy did not worship humanity, nor did it slavishly imitate them. Instead, it had absorbed their most powerful lesson, that life, for all its chaos and sorrow, was a gift to be embraced fully, recklessly, joyfully, and that sometimes, the best thing one could do for the universe was to nap, recharge, and wake up ready to paint it in colors no one had ever dared to imagine. As the first rays of Quendos Prime's twin suns brushed the horizon, Commander Zyth rose, stretching his crystalline limbs with a soft chime. He knew that one day, perhaps centuries from now, the humans would wake again. They would blink against the light, stretch their arms, and step into a universe vastly changed. He smiled, imagining the scene, the grins, the inevitable sarcastic remarks, the demand for coffee and pizza, and the wonder in their eyes as they saw what had grown in their absence. The new normal was just the beginning. The real adventure was yet to come. The galaxy would not just survive, it would thrive, it would dream, it would laugh, and it would carry forward the spirit of those strange, beautiful giants who had taught them the simplest and greatest truth. The universe was a playground, and every star, every world, every heartbeat was an invitation to dream bigger. And somewhere, deep in the drifting fleet of sleeping ships, a million humans smiled in their dreams, knowing that when they woke again, they would find a galaxy not just alive, but living in a way they had always hoped it could. The humans have drifted back into their great sleep, but the galaxy they left behind is no longer the same. Their legacy lives on, in every laugh, every dream, every reckless act of wonder that now pulses through the stars. But this is only the beginning. What will the galaxy look like when the giants wake once more? What new chaos, what new beauty will they unleash? We can only imagine, and we invite you to imagine it with us. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think humanity will dream of next? And when they awaken again, will the universe be ready? Until then, keep dreaming bigger.